Suzanne, we're going to look more closely at the do-it-yourself option, the home insemination and donor agreements. Why do you think couples are choosing that?
Well, I think a lot of people think it's less intrusive, it's more personal, and a big factor is the cost. Fertility clinics are expensive, and people feel as though it's more natural dealing with it themselves at home and usually with a known donor.
Okay. And are there any risks associated with the home insemination and donor agreement route?
I think there's two main risks or important points to make. The first is that if you have home insemination, then you will only get parental responsibility and be on the birth certificate if you're married or in a civil partnership at the time of conception.
Okay.
If you are a cohabiting couple or partners who are not married or in a civil partnership, then you cannot be named on the birth certificate and you can't get parental responsibility. So, home insemination is
So that, if I can just stop you there, that's an important point to consider, isn't it?
It
In
it
any,
it is, and that's why you need to be having discussions beforehand, because the ideal is that you have a beautiful baby and you both have the same legal standing and you both have parental responsibility. But if it's home insemination and you are not married or in a civil partnership, that is not going to happen. And the other main issue to consider is that home insemination means that the donor has legal rights,
okay.
and that's not the same as if it's at a licensed clinic.
So if it's home insemination, the donor may assert those legal rights, and the parents of the child may not be able to stop those rights being asserted.
Yes, that's right. The problem is that the donor may have legal rights to the child, but also they may have responsibilities, so child maintenance to be paid.
Okay.
And it, normally that is not what the parties intend.
Mm.
So the important thing is to have the conversation and think about having a donor agreement.
Yeah. So a donor agreement is, in any agreement, it's a written document entered into between the birth mother,
Both birth mother,
partner,
intended parent,
okay,
and the donor.
and the donor.
Yes.
And so, in that agreement, if the donor says, I'm not going to assert my legal rights, is that a position that can be enforced by the birth mother and partner?
The problem is that donor agreements are not legally binding. So they are evidence of intention.
So, what's the point of having one then?
Well, the point of having one is that you're setting out what those agreement and the understanding is at the time.
Mm.
And hopefully you're airing any issues and you're then able to make an informed decision as to whether you should proceed
Mhm.
prior to any conception. And it's looking at what intentions are, because there are donors who don't want anything to do with a child that's born. You've got others where everybody intends the donor to have a role in the child's life in some way, shape, or form. But those discussions can be whether they're going to be named on the birth certificate
Mhm.
or whether they will have contact with the child, what the child will call them. There are also important areas to consider as to, before conception, disclosing medical history. You know, in the future, what role will the donor take in relation to schooling? Will
Mm.
they get school reports? So, although the document isn't legally binding, it's something that the court would take into account if an issue arises in the future. So, if, for example, the parties agree that the donor will have contact and see the child, if issues arise and that doesn't happen for whatever reason, or it happens and then it stops, then the donor may apply to the court for a contact order. And the judge will look at that donor agreement and will look at what is in the child's best interest, which always comes first. But the court can take into account what was agreed and what was discussed at the time.
So, the donor agreement signifies intention,
Yes.
but in the event that the matter ever proceeds to court, a judge will look afresh at what is best for the child, but will take into account the intentions expressed in the donor agreement.
That's right. But I think it's worth noting that from my experience, although people say, well, it's not legally binding, what's the point? There is a point. It's addressing everybody's mind at the start to what those issues are
Yeah,
or could be,
yeah.
and what those intentions are, to hope that there are no disputes in the future.
Is it sensible to have that agreement drawn up professionally, or can parents draw an agreement up themselves?
Parents can do things themselves, but I would always say it's worth getting legal advice. I think one of the problems these days is that everything's on AI, and a lot of these agreements, when I've come across them online, have been American based.
Mhm, mhm,
So I think it's invaluable to get legal advice
mhm.
in relation to these matters, but get legal advice before conception to look at all those other areas and the differences between being married or in a civil partnership. Just have that conversation.
Okay, thanks.